Welcome, everybody. It is Business Monday. The sun is shining in downtown Providence. Snow is melting, but probably the most important thing is the money man. Gary Sass is in the house talking about everything that could affect your livelihood, your retirement, the well-being of America's democracy. Gary Sass, how was your weekend?
Excellent.
Excellent. Good. Do you guys just sit around when you have wealth like that, just counting stuff, or do you just have other people do the counting, or how does the super wealthy deal with?
Well, I don't know. I have no idea. I watch basketball.
A lot of college basketball.
Yeah.
Excellent. Let's see here. Let's go to the state budget. The state budget is hearings are beginning to take place on the budget, hearing the different provisions within what Governor Raimondo has proposed. I think there's a collective belief by legislative leaders that this might even be called a do-over budget to some degree, that this budget is lacking in a number of ways, that a number of the provisions that are proposed really aren't reality. This seems like a strange budget for Governor Raimondo to offer in her 5th year in office. Why wouldn't you put forward a legacy kind of budget? Do something big, important. Why? Why the strategy?
Well, I don't know what the strategy is, but I look at the budget, and it's an old-fashioned 1970s tax and spend budget. And there were a lot of programs that the governor apparently felt were important, such as, free college, universal pre-K. I could go on and on.
But those are, in fairness to her, the combined cost of those two things are fairly small.
But budgets are at the margin.
Yeah.
They are small, but there's just a whole slew of fee and tax increases to address that. So I don't have an answer for it, except that she probably felt that the highest priority needed to be given to the spending programs she wanted, and instead of going into the budget and trying to find monies through efficiencies and economies, that wasn't done, so it's just driven by revenue. That certainly would upset a legislative body in this particular climate. And I think the other thing is, I don't know how serious governors are sometimes in submitting budgets, because they know that the budget will be reworked. They know that the final revenue estimates won't be available to May. And if you think about it, the governors are required, all governors are required in this state to put out a budget based on November economics, November revenue forecasts, and inevitably the May forecast on which the General Assembly is required to use in passing its budget are different. And so you put a governor in a position of, well, I'd like to put this program in, or I'd like to put that program in, but there's not enough revenue, so I'll submit a budget that keeps those programs in. I'll submit it in ways that I know are probably unpalatable to the people of the state, and we'll see what happens in May. And I think, I can't say that with any certainty, but that would be the human nature.
But why take the hits? Obviously, huge backlash against beach fees. I know you were the only person in the state of Rhode Island who championed her. But all these little fees. Listen, the Wall Street Journal, yourself, most everybody has said this isn't the way we want to progress. The legislative leaders have already shot down the beach fees and said we're not going to touch the beach fees for 3 more years.
Well, I got to clarify what I said on the beach fees, and I'm not going to walk this. I'm not going to walk this back an inch. I said that there was no reason to put beach fees on residents. I said the beaches were a bargain for people from Connecticut, and I had no problem at all increasing beach fees.
Isn't there some requirement because of federal matches that you can't have it so disproportionate? You can't charge the Connecticut resident $500 in the Rhode Island resident.
But you can charge the Rhode Island resident $7 and a Connecticut resident $12 or $13. Yeah. That's not what was being suggested. So I think you have to look at each of these revenue things, with an eye towards what's reality. And also, the fees tend to be regressive. Mm-hmm. I know one of the things the legislature really took pride in was eliminating the fees, and I was involved in, it didn't come from us, it didn't come from any administration I worked in, but the legislature one night, really late in the budget session, said, what can we do for the people?
Yeah.
And there wasn't a lot of money to play with.
3 years ago.
And there wasn't a lot of money to play with, so they knocked down the fees. So it was a kind of a tin air to increase those fees. But there are a lot of fee increases in that budget that really are questionable. taxing Netflix, taxing downloads of that sort is not particularly what you want to do right now, given the way the economy is going. And so there are a lot of fees. Chafee got blasted for putting a lot of fees in.
And they got shot down.
Yeah. Now, one issue which no one's speaking about, as the economy changes and we move away from an economy that's produced goods and retail declines, you still have to generate sales tax revenue. And the way you generate sales tax revenue is through broadening the base to services. But every time that's been done, the common sense approach was, if I add $50 million worth of services, I will cut my sales tax rate, and I will manage through economies. This was just spend and spend and spend. It had no reality in what could be done to broaden the base but reduce the rate.
Governor Raimondo, I don't think, is going to retire from business or the public sector when she leaves in 3.5 years. Obviously, she wants to have a legacy of what she was able to accomplish over her 8 years as governor, 4 years as general treasurer. Where does she go? Is it just about free college for CCRI and Rick? Is that all we're going to remember about her?
Well, no. The first thing you'll remember about her, if memories don't become hazy over time, is that her crowning accomplishment was done before she was governor.
Yeah.
Her leadership in truth in numbers and reforming the pension system was a notable accomplishment. Now, we can argue that there were better or worse ways to do it, but the fact of the matter is she made a substantial gain in how she worked on the pension. So that is a legacy that cannot be taken away from her. Her legacy, however, beyond that as governor, is very murky right now. Even the Wall Street Journal, and this governor spends a lot of time, or her PR people spend a lot of time contacting national media, keeping up a kind of a persona that this is a pro-business, moderate Democrat governor, but her actions certainly this last cycle don't indicate that. And the Wall Street Journal said it was a shame. They used the word, shame, that she was running business out of the state, just like the governors of Connecticut and Illinois. And the Connecticut and Illinois economically are basket cases right now. So her national persona is changing. But I think more important to that facts eventually catch up with you.
Yeah.
And if you begin, and so we've been fed a steady diet that the economy is improving. We have more jobs in the state. And it's true. They're not fibs at all. We have more people working. The unemployment rate is low. But when you look at the numbers, the legacy either will be made or broken by what happens, how the economy looks when she leaves. So this last year alone, of 2018, the figures were revised down for labor force gains. We gained 3,000 jobs, I think, when we were projecting to gain about 8,000 jobs. The labor force is not where it was in 2006, 12 years later. The jobs that we're creating, the wages, and this was done by people on our own revenue estimating conference, 28% of the jobs that we've created pay less than $35,000. 60% of the, not 60, 50% of the jobs, close to 50%, pay less than $60,000. So 75% of the jobs that we're creating some are good jobs, but a lot are pretty minimal, paid jobs, above the minimum wage, but not that much above the minimum wage. Only 25% are paying more than 60, and you have to create, wealth and more of those jobs. So we're not doing that. If you look at the out-year forecasts, we would be 45th of the 50 states in terms of job creation over the next 5 years. Our unemployment rate is going up. The number of jobs that we show to create over the next 5 years goes from 504,000 to 510,000. That's 6,000. That's less than 6,000 jobs.
Let's talk about jobs for a second. 1 month does not make an annual job cycle, but in January in Rhode Island, we lost 1,700 jobs, and in Massachusetts, they gained 11,400 jobs in the month of January. And then February's numbers came out nationally, I believe, on Friday, and showed that the country as a whole only gained 20,000 jobs, which The month before it gained $380,000.
The average over the 3 months has been closer to 200,000 per month. So
But if we go to January for 1 second, then nationally we gained 380,000. Massachusetts gained its share, 11.4. Rhode Island dropped 1,700. And we know February is not going to be a winning month for Rhode Island because there's only 20,000 jobs created nationally. Have we peaked, or is this wait and see type of situation?
Well, you have to wait and see. You haven't got enough data. But I think the story is, and I have been a critic, as you know, of not Commerce Rhode Island's people, but their programs. And so we're spending tens of millions of dollars on these programs, and I just went through a litany of figures. The first litany of figures was that we didn't do squat in 2018 with revised figures. The second litany was that over the next 5 years, based on the state's projections, not mine, growth is going to be in the bottom third of the states. The jobs that we've created, a third of them are paying less than $35,000 a year. Now, that job is better than no job, but that's what's being created.
One number to further give you anxiety is you've raised questions about the amount of money going to apartments and hotel projects from Rebuild Rhode Island. Hotel tax numbers just came out today. Year over year, hotel tax revenue decreased slightly. So the demand for hotel rooms may have peaked in 2017, not in 2018. We may be putting a lot of product on the market that may not be quite as necessary as earlier was prophesized.
Well, I think Commerce Rhode Island really has a problem in distinguishing economic development from real estate development. Now, I would defend them to say that as we're developing additional office buildings in Wexford, we probably needed strategically more hotel space. But we didn't need the number that they're being subsidized by the taxpayer. You know, 1 or 2, not 5 or 6 or 7.
Keep going.
And so that's that's the problem. And we're at a point right now where I think the General Assembly, and I think the General Assembly has to take some of the blame for this, because their oversight over what's happened in economic development in the state has been miserable. They're cheerleaders as opposed to legislators. And they have to. The Pew Foundation, published a study recently and suggested things that you need to look at in developing tax incentives. And the legislature, just to summarize it as briefly as I can, at least needs to look at what we based our tax incentives on, whether we met goals, and really have somebody come in or do it themselves and do an independent audit and evaluation. The program's been in existence for 4 years now. There's some good that's come from the program. There's some questionable decisions that were made with the program. But after 4 years, when you look at the jobs numbers we're facing and you look at the projections of what's going to happen to jobs and wages over the next 5 years, somebody has to sit back and say, wait a second, are these investments going to have a long-term impact that we hoped they would have had? And I don't know the answer to that question, but we need that independent kind of evaluation.
Should the legislature be playing that role as oversight? I mean, there's a standing committee on oversight in the House. They get ramped up from time to time on different issues, but don't ever seem to follow through with any vigor.
No,
a few good sound bites and off to the races.
No, I think it has to be done. It has to be overseen by people in the legislature that have experience with economics and finances.
Should it be House Finance that really has maybe a special task force or committee on?
Possibly a combined
joint House.
But I think the Speaker and I think the Senate President have to be involved, and they have to take the mask off that these are wonderful programs. They may in fact be good programs, and some of them may be wonderful, but you can't be a cheerleader anymore. We spent so much money, and now that you look at the economic results, on one hand, the governor says, well, we've created more people working and more jobs. Well, that's not totally true. We have more people working. We've grown 50,000 jobs, over this period of time, but we're not where we were, and we're not keeping up with other people. The fact that no one talks about, well, our unemployment is down, but we still rank 34th. We're in the bottom third of the states, barely, in terms of unemployment rate. So yeah, and it could have been worse. While we've made some progress. Now is time. 4 years is plenty of time. 5 years is appropriate time to go back in there and say, okay, what have we got for this hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars we spent on economic development? Where can we invest more in programs that are working? Where should we be pulling back on programs that are not working? We don't have the mentality here at this point to go back and do that and take that look.
We're going to see a major decrease in the number of retail employees over the next couple of years. Business Insider's tracking at about 5,200 retail locations of major chains have already closed. We're only through 2.5 months, not even 2.5 months. We're seeing, the term is Armageddon. We had a story this weekend tracking a lot of the closures and impacts to this area. It's significant, and it started around 17 in earnest. We saw it here with 31 Benny's stores closing, but it's been, Payless had 10 stores, I think, in Rhode Island close in January, and Swansea Mall closes at the end of this month, on and on and on and on. Is the U.S. economy, and especially is the Rhode Island economy, ready for this transformation and the number of people that are going to lose their jobs and what is going to happen to these people?
No, it's much bigger than that. It's the nature of work is changing. So it's a changing in retail. It's also artificial intelligence. And so between now and 2030, most of the number, I should say most, but a significant percentage of the jobs now are not going to be there anymore. And now is the time to start training. And that's one of the concerns about how we managed economic development in the state. It's been the focus. We were really, 5 years ago, we were at the pits. We were the bottom of everything. We invested a lot of money. We reorganized and restructured. We've funded a number of projects, put some tax incentives for jobs in. And at the same time, the question remains, what did we really look at and do that was a game changer or a structural thing? Giving somebody a tax incentive to build another building is not a game changer. Giving a company a jobs tax credit, which is probably a good thing, doesn't change anything because that was frosting on the cake. If the company was marketable and making profit, those jobs have been created. And certainly you wanted to create it here, so you give them some type of incentive. So we've kind of played small ball. Now, the people in the State House would probably take strong exception to what I've just said, but the questions you ask are the right questions. What are we doing to change the structure? We've known for a long time that we have failing schools, and that's really the feeder to changing the structure. And yet we've started, we've stopped. We had high stakes testing, we had evaluation. Then we didn't have high stakes testing and evaluation. And Massachusetts, stayed the course. So it's that kind of leadership, it's that kind of structural change. It's really dealing with one or two big things that make a difference.
So in the 1970s, late 1960s, early 1970s, we lost manufacturing in Rhode Island. We lost whole sectors of it. First going down to the Carolinas and other places in the South, and then ultimately them going overseas. And some will argue we've never recovered economically since that transition. Now, some of those jobs, some of those people then went into retail. There was a retail boom in the 90s. Now we're seeing a reversal, and it's a fast reversal. And are we ready for Route 2 to be half vacant? Are we ready for Providence Place Mall, where almost the entire first floor of restaurants are now gone and vacant for years?
Well, when you point that out and paint that description, you have to realize that that's a national trend.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And Providence Place Mall was a good investment. It was 1995. I was working for Almond at the time. I think 1995 the deal was made. So that's been 25, 30 years.
Yep.
That's in the real world, that's the shelf life of
anything.
Yeah. And so, we made a good investment. It helped. But then you look at the rest of the city of Providence. There was never any discussion of once you built the mall, what was your urban strategy beyond that? There was no urban strategy behind that. Are we ready? You're never ready, and somebody can sit up here and say, yeah, I got the the magic solution, and when X happens, we're going to push a button, and Y is going to happen, and it will be okay. But it's how you lead, it's how you think, it's the kinds of things you work on, and it's not building another hotel, and it's not building another apartment house that no one in Rhode Island can afford to get a room in, or buy an apartment in. It's having a different mindset. So I don't fault people for not having an instant solution on the shelf. I fault people for not dealing with the basic structural problems of infrastructure, of education, of certain areas of tax policy, which I think we've done a better job there than some other places. And that's the problem of leadership. And so there's no silver bullet, but we have to deal with the structural issues.
Let's run down to Washington, D.C. 31% of Americans would would vote for Donald Trump to be reelected. Therefore, 60-something%, I guess there's some undecided, but let's call it 60% of Americans do not want to see him reelected. Let's add another factor. In a number of polls, Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden are leading different polling depending on the situation. But Bernie Sanders looks to be the best organized and the best fundraising. This is a guy who was not as being labeled by Fox News. He was the socialist mayor.
He was proud of it.
Of Burlington, Vermont, literally.
He was proud of it. Yeah.
Is Bernie Sanders the next president of the United States?
I don't know the answer, because I think what you're seeing in the polling data right now is familiarity. So the name Biden, the name Sanders.
Fundraising, though.
That's where Sanders has a strong thing, and he really is showing that you don't have to have big donors. You have to have a lot of donors.
Yeah.
And repeated.
Well, and if you have a lot of little donors, you probably also have a lot of voters who are able to be mobilized.
Well, it's too early to say, but I know this. When Democrats were asked by Gallup recently, what would you like to see your party do, become more progressive or more moderate, 54% said more moderate. Now, in the Republican Party, it was just the opposite. 57% said the party should get more conservative. And I think there'll be a push in the country during this election to find, candidates that are problem solvers, that will work on real solutions to real, problems. And so there's a long way to go, but one candidate like that has not emerged. Somebody will emerge to challenge the progressives, and Democrats will have a nice Donnybrook between a more moderate approach to governing, and not going back to the Clinton approach, but a more moderate approach to governing, and a more progressive approach. If they go too far, one thing we do know, if they go too far, if either party goes too far to the left or right, they really strengthen the other party. So there's a long way to be seen. But Sanders is an effective candidate, but his name is better known than a lot of other people's names.
And none of these more moderate presidential candidates, at least in this early stages, Hickenlooper, former governor of Colorado, who I think was well respected by a pretty wide swath of both moderates, progressives, pro-business in the state of Colorado. I think he served 8 years. Or Schultz, former CEO of Starbucks, have seemed to get any early traction. Is this just not the year of the executive governor CEO?
It's too early to say. Hickenlooper, who I thought, would be an outstanding candidate, refused to admit he was a capitalist.
Yeah.
He made buku money with his breweries and his businesses in Denver. Even Elizabeth Warren, when asked the question, "Are you a capitalist?" she said, "Yes, I just want to regulate him a lot."
Right.
So his start out of the blocks has not been auspicious. It's too early. At this point, how many years ago did you think Barack Obama was going to be the nominee of the Democrat Party? No one did, and so we'll see. Right now, I still believe a lot of it's driven by name recognition. I think there's a lot of sorting out to do within the Democrat Party as to how progressive or how moderate they want to be. I think the conversation about the Green New Deal is going to draw a lot of things out. I think Sanders' proposal of Medicare for all, no one understands what it is. And if you tell people on Medicare that you're going to lose your insurance, and you tell business people with employer insurance you're going to lose your insurance, and you tell docs and hospitals that their reimbursement is going to be cut by 30 to 40%. And you tell people, oh, by the way, you're going to have a 50% tax increase, to 50%
So
tax
I
rate.
don't disagree with you if we were talking about a general election, but those who go and vote, who are mobilized in primaries, are generally the biggest outliers.
And see, and that's a challenge for both parties.
Yep.
It's really a challenge to the Democratic Party because you look at all the numbers right now, and you would be right to predict that Trump can easily be beaten. His margins in the Electoral College in places like Michigan and Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, total of 75, 80,000 votes. So he's more than vulnerable. He's in an underdog position. But if there's not the leadership in the other party, and the party is allowed to shift too far, or it can be painted as shifting too far to the left, it's going to reinvigorate this guy. I know this is very anecdotal. I know people who wouldn't vote for Trump, at all. And when you tell them, well, the opposition may be Bernie Sanders or Senator Warren, they say, well, I better think about this some more. And it's a broad middle out there. And I wrote something, and I argue that the party that's able to do the best job in attracting moderates is going to win this next election. And so, and that's still, not
You have
known.
that column today.
Yeah, and
GoLocal.
there are people we're working with on a national unity agenda for 2020, and there is a craving in this country for electing problem solvers, people who get things done, whether they're Democrat or Republicans. Well, and ideologically, almost 8 out of 10 people will tell you that they think the parties are too much controlled by the ideological extremes in the party. Very hard to get away from, because you got gerrymandering, you got political correctness, you got this phony populism that's going on. So it's easy to talk about it, but the party that figures out a way to break out of that mold and move, in the case of the Republicans, to the center right, or in the case of the Democrats, to the center left, is going to have a real strong advantage. And right now, just the thing that happened with the Democrats, not condemning anti-Semitism. That's as obvious as the nose on your face. And they had to be so politically correct that they couldn't condemn anti-Semitism. That doesn't make any sense.
Sounds like a Republican move.
Yeah.
If the polling is correct and 80% of Americans would like a moderate candidate, and let's just say in Rhode Island it's 70%, none of the 4 members of the congressional delegation have demonstrated any desire to be bipartisan in any significant way. Georgetown has a special center named after Dick Lugar, the former senator from Indiana. They measure the bipartisanship of each member of Congress. Rhode Island is generally the most partisan delegation, and especially Congressman Cicilline and Sheldon Whitehouse are in the absolute bottom of the list for bipartisanship. Is there any hope of encouraging them, moving them to work better across the aisle, or is that's just never going to happen with these 4 members of the delegation?
Well, I think Cicilline is hopeless. I think Sheldon seems to play it both ways sometimes. He will.
He is far below Jack Reed, and almost the least.
But there are Republicans. McCain worked with him on certain issues, so he may be able to work on certain issues. I wouldn't dismiss that. But Rhode Island is not a prototypical state for the nation. It's a blue state. I'm not sure it's the first or second most blue state in the country. It's even so-called moderate Democrats, really, are gravitating, towards the left because it's such a blue state. A good example is how the Speaker handled the debate on the abortion issue. Mm-hmm. And I still don't know what the bill does or what it doesn't do. It was not something I would look at, but I watched the Speaker, and there was a time, if you distinguish managers from leaders, it's an interesting exercise to go through. If you teach management and administration. A leader has followers.
Right.
A manager has subordinates.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying members of the legislature are subordinated to the speaker, but the analogy holds some truth that the speaker's in a position of power, so he can effectively manage the House.
That's what he's elected to do, correct?
Or the leadership.
Right.
But he's also elected to lead.
Right.
And on these issues, he's having more trouble leading. He's managing well. He's a capable speaker, so he's managing well. But you also have to lead to stay there a long time.
Gary Sass, thank you very much,
My pleasure.
as always. Great insights both into both state and federal issues. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Appreciate all our guests, Leo Pollack, interesting entrepreneur, reinventing the waste stream. Anthony Sanders, our bet is he's going to be a big, big success in his custom bow tie company. I think that one's ready to bust loose. And Gary Sass, the money man. We'll have to get you one with money dripped all over it.
I'd love a bow tie. I have trouble tying them, so that'd be great.
Everybody look back tomorrow. Kate Nagel is in the house hosting Go Local Live, and we've got a jam-packed week. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. A number of interesting stories on today. Take a last peek, and I think there's a couple things going up shortly this evening. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you back tomorrow.